one of the best kept secrets about being disabled is that we often have better sex, I think.
Being a woman with a disability definitely changed my perception of what sexy is.
Just because you are disabled in one way or another, for me it's my vision, doesn't mean you're not any good at being intimate.
There's a lot of ways that the assumption that we don't have sex is just put on us. And we do have sex. We have so much sex.
Today, we're talking about sex and disability.
Deep conversations, real honest stories, and complex, relevant issues all examined through a disability lens. This is In Focus.
Hello, I'm April Hubbard. Joining me virtually from Toronto are Kaleigh Trace and Andrew Gurza. Kaleigh Trace is a couples therapist. She has a spinal cord injury and is the author of the book Hot, Wet, and Shaking: How I Learned to Talk About Sex. Andrew Gurza is a disability awareness consultant, podcaster, and co-founder of Bumpin', a sex company for people with disabilities. He has cerebral palsy. Andrew and Kaleigh, hello to both of you.
Hi, good to be here.
Hi, it's really nice to be here. Thank you.
Andrew, you have the moniker Queer Cripple tattooed on your chest. Why is this identity so important to you?
I think this identity is really important to me because I wanted to take all the stigma out of both the words queer and cripple. There's a lot of history of derogatory use of both those words, and I wanted to take them away. It's a personal choice, but I think using it for me is a way of empowering myself to be like, being disabled and being crippled is not a deficit to me. It's actually something that can be positive. So that's why it's important. Also, I think when I'm having sexy times with somebody, they also have to reconcile the fact that I'm disabled by seeing that on my chest.
I love that you center that identity. Kaleigh, I noticed your book Hot, Wet, and Shaking is dedicated to your younger self and the years you spent uncomfortably stumbling towards who you are. You add, you're grateful for the wrong turns you took that led you here. What makes you grateful for these wrong turns?
Oh, good question. I think it takes all of us different amounts of time to reconcile who we are and to learn to live with our identities with pride, the way that you just spoke about, Andrew. And I know it took me a long time to feel confident and comfortable and proud of being disabled and of being queer. And I think through all of those wrong turns where I acted from a place of shame or embarrassment about who I was, I got to learn a lot more about who I really am and how I want to be in the world.
And where has that led you now?
Yeah. Well, I guess these days it has led me to a place of feeling really comfortable with my body and who I am. And I'm now I wrote that book when I was in my mid-20s, and now I'm in my mid-30s, and I feel really good about being disabled and good about my body.
That's wonderful to hear. So how has living in a disabled body allowed you to have a greater enjoyment of sex and pleasure?
I love that question because I think that is one of the best kept secrets about being disabled is that we often have better sex, I think. I think that sex, as a couples therapist, I talk a lot about sex, and I really firmly believe that sex is best when we spend a lot of time talking about it. And if your body doesn't conform to normative ideas of what sex should look like, you have to figure out pretty early how to talk about it, which means that you just get to have better sex.
I would just echo what Kaleigh said. I think disabled people do have better sex because we talk about it, and because many of us with non-conformative bodies and bodies that don't meet the standard of what sexy is have to talk about a lot of this stuff really plainly with our partners and really dive into communication levels that most people having sex don't have to have. And I think that when you do that and when you really dive into communication like that, the sex or any kind of intimacy you're having with the partner is that much better.
I couldn't agree more. You both prioritize sharing stories of disabled people and bodies enjoying pleasure. Why are these stories so important to share?
These stories are really important to share because we don't see them in mainstream culture. We don't see them in movies. We don't see them in TV. We don't see them in books. We don't see them in popular culture. So we have to share these stories and put them in the forefront and shine a light on them, because otherwise most of society would be happy to just never hear about them. I edited a book for a company, the Bumpin' Book of Love, Lust, and Disability, last year. And that's still one of like 3 books on disability that's huge, including Kaleigh's. So it's not really out there a lot.
Yeah, I completely agree. When I wrote the book that I wrote about my own disabled body experiencing pleasure, it was an act of desperation. I was so longing to be witnessed and to witness bodies like mine. And it felt like, well, I have to do it. The narratives that I do easily access about disability are pitiful and about pain. And pain is real, and sadness and grief are real. But prioritizing those narratives above narratives of pleasure just felt like a real, real absence, like a real dishonest absence of what it means to be disabled.
One problem I discovered when I entered the world of disability was the inaccessibility of information, education, and access to sexual health clinics. How can we address the lack of education and access in the disability world and promote sex positivity as a human right?
Well, we know the World Health Organization defines pleasure as a human right. And the way we do that for disabled bodies, I think, is in terms of sexual health information, we need to include the word disabled in all of our sexual health information, because we're there. We need to, in all of our curriculums for youth in schools, we need to have them be taught about ableism during the sex ed courses, have them taught by a disabled person. We need to do all this stuff. In terms of sexual health clinics, we need to have lifts and ramps and attendant care and all those things, and Hoyer lifts and things that disabled people need to be properly examined should they have a sexual health issue and they need to see a doctor. But we need to address the fact that there's so much ableism in the sexual health space that we're not talking about, and make even small changes to try to fix that.
It needs to be a priority for everyone. Kaleigh, how would the world be a different place if we normalized conversations around disability and sex in our everyday lives?
Well, I think the world would be a better place if we normalize conversations of disability and sex in our lives. And like both those things together and both those things separate. I think that we need to collectively figure out ways to continue to talk about sex that are consensual and exciting and pleasurable. And I think there's been a lot of work in that regard in the last 10 years. And I think that the more we talk about sex and disability, the more we'll live in a world that recognizes that bodies are messy and bodies are pleasurable all at the same time.
I always say this in the work I do: you could leave your house today and run into the sexiest, hottest disabled person in your life, and then you're going to have those conversations anyway. Even if you yourself don't encounter disability right now, you might meet somebody that changes your whole worldview that you want to get to know sexually. Then you're going to start to have these conversations anyway. And I think we have to just remember that disability is all around us, whether we choose to look for it or not.
So true. Kaleigh, your work often centers around the intersections between pain and pleasure. How does the disability community use our innate understanding of pain as a superpower?
I think this stems back to the best kept secret that we have: better sex. Pain and pleasure are two sides of the same pole, like two poles of the same spectrum is the words I'm looking for. They're two poles of the same spectrum, and they're often related. Like kink and BDSM exist because pain can be pleasurable. And people have known that for a really long time. And I think disabled people because we have to often live in a way that is really embodied. We have to live in our bodies because they are giving us information all the time. I think sometimes non-disabled people get to exit their bodies and live in their brains, or I don't know, it's not my experience, but I know that many disabled people, we really live in our bodies, and that is such a superpower. And when you are conscious of your body, you know how to use pain in ways that are liberatory, and you know how to find pleasure despite pain. And that takes work. It's not innate, but I think we have a big step up.
I love the way you put that. Andrew, do you have anything to add to that?
When I curated the book, The Bumpin' Book of Love, Loss, and Disability, we do a whole chapter on pain and pleasure. And people would say things to us like, oh yeah, I feel like I'm in pain all the time, but then I get to have sex and my body automatically stops feeling pain, or I still feel the pain, but it's worth it to have a good sex life.
Thanks for sharing that, Andrew. Now, you and your sister recently launched a company called Bumpin'. Can you tell us a little bit about that company and why it was so important for you to create it?
Yeah, Heather and I, my sister, we created Bumpin' about 2 and almost 3 years ago. She heard me talking about how I couldn't self-pleasure. And so when I went to go visit her in Australia, we were talking about it one day, and she goes, well, why can't you just get a toy off the shelf? And I said, well, toys off the shelf don't work for me because of my dexterity issues. And so I showed her my hands and I showed her how they don't work. And she goes, oh, well, okay, did you want to make one? And I was like, do I want to make a sex toy with my sister? I don't know how I feel about that. And so then we put a survey out on Reddit and we asked about 100 people. And when we got the survey back, 92% of the people we spoke to said, we want a toy like this. It's about damn time. So we realized we were doing something bigger than ourselves, and it could change the game for sex tech and sex tech around disability forever. So we were like, we have to do it.
This fills a definite need, Andrew. I can't wait to see your products on store shelves everywhere, and I already have mine ordered. I always enjoy sitting down with both of you. Thanks for taking time with me today.
Such a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. This has been really fun.
Coming up, the conversation becomes a little more intimate.
If I'm not getting it when I want it, then I'm probably losing my mind a little bit.
In Focus will be right back. You're watching In Focus.
No two people are the same. Different people enjoy different things, especially when it comes to sex. We reached out to 4 Canadians with a variety of disabilities, genders, sexual orientations, and backgrounds, and asked them to answer some intimate questions about themselves, their thoughts, experiences, and they were happy to share.
My name is Bean Gill, and I'm from Edmonton, Alberta, and I have a spinal cord injury at T10, T11. Being a woman with a disability definitely changed my perception of what sexy is. And I initially didn't feel like I was sexy. I didn't think that I could be sexy. I didn't even think that I could be attractive or that anybody would want to really be with me. And I think that's because I had the stigma of people with disabilities, even though I was now the person with a disability. And so working with my psychologist really helped me a lot in finding my true confidence and really being able to fall in love with myself again. And something that she said to me really stuck out to me. She said, you know, if you don't love yourself, then how do you expect other people to love you too?
My name is Dev Ramsewak. I live in Toronto. I use they, them pronouns. I identify as gender fluid, as queer, as both physically disabled and neurodivergent, and I guess diasporic Indo-Caribbean as well. When I was younger, I viewed sex and disability as mutually exclusive. There was no real representation, there was no images, there was nothing to really say that disabled people had sexualities. You know, disabled people have been talking about this for a long time, this forced desexualization of their identities, regardless of how they identify. They're often, having their autonomy removed, often having, viewed as infantile, not it's uncomfortable for a lot of people to think about us having sex because it's like thinking about children having sex. You don't want to do it. But that's not true.
My name is J.R. Bjarnson. I'm from Red Deer, Alberta. I am married. My visual eye condition is called Peter's anomaly. It means scarring of the cornea. I think the best part about not being able to see someone is I don't know what they look like. I don't know what they're wearing, but then when we get to know each other and, one thing leads to another, you get to actually physically feel what the person looks like through the power of touch. And I think that makes intimacy more effective. It makes it more better because a lot of people go by just vision alone. But when you can't see what looks good, you got to see what feels good.
My name is Milena Kazanavichus. I live in Shubuktuk, unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq. Very happy and privileged to be here, otherwise known as Halifax, Nova Scotia. And my disability is that I am completely blind. How important is sex in life or life in general? Life in general, it's highly important to me. It is one of my vices. It is a stress reliever for me. I know that if I'm not getting it when I want it, then I'm probably losing my mind a little bit. It relieves all the hormones, all the estrogen, testosterone that runs through my body. And now that I'm perimenopausal, my hormones are all over the place. So I just need a little bit of relief.
I think there's a very heterosexual, cisgender idea of how two bodies have sex. There isn't that much information on self-pleasure. There isn't that much information on how to protect yourself from, digital or manual, hand stimulation, from oral, from other types of things, different types of sex. For disabled people, we may not have sex the same way that other folks have. But for queer folks, there's a lot of different ways that we do have sex that is very different from heteronormative ideas.
My disability has definitely shaped my sexuality and my experiences and even my definition of pleasure and intimacy. Like I said, my spinal cord injury is at about T10, T11. And so my sensations are very different. I can feel touch, and I can feel pretty much everything below my level of injury except for hot, cold, and pain. But it's not the same feeling as it was pre-injury. And so, sexually orgasming and stuff, it's different than what it used to be. And so it did take me a little while to really figure that out of like, what does feel good, what doesn't feel good.
I don't have to worry about whether the lights are on or off. I don't care what your face looks like. And I feel like I'm the goddess and the god and the master no matter what, because I can't see. And my blindness has left me with a feeling of I'm walking around, I can't see you, nobody can see me, so I'm just that much more free. So it's been a positive, my losing my sight in my sex life, where I was a little bit too much concerned when I was sighted about perhaps the way I looked physically, perhaps what I was wearing. And now at this point, I'm the hottest thing in the room. And if you're in here with me, you best be coming after me or I'm coming after you.
My spina bifida causes partial paralysis from the waist down, including incontinence. And so there's a lot more intimacy involved in getting down to have, especially penetrative sex, because it can lead to incontinence and things like that, which can put me in a dangerous situation if the person I'm having sex with or hooking up with or making out with turns out to be very against that or reacts violently to that. I can be in a very vulnerable position.
Safety is something I worry about a lot nowadays because being in a wheelchair, I'm mobile, but as soon as I'm outside of my wheelchair, I'm not. And so any partner that I do have, there's a lot of communication that's needed. There's a lot of conversations that have to happen before anything sexual will happen, because I need to be able to feel safe for myself. And I need to explain to my partner about my spasticity and about how to move my legs and how to, do certain things, because my body is not like an able-bodied person anymore. And so those conversations initially were really difficult to have because it's not something you normally talk about. But being in the situation that I'm in, I felt like I need to have these conversations. There needs to be clear expectations. Everything needs to be open and honest.
The things that help set the stage for good intercourse, good sex, in my opinion, is generally getting to know the person, find out their favorite color, find out what they enjoy for breakfast. How can you use that information to be romantic? Things like that. I think once we get to know one another and you build that stable and steady information together, that rapport, I think that sets the stage for good intimacy and good sex. It's not just an intimate activity. It can be scary. It can be intimidating.
I have noticed that a lot of people are actually afraid to ask questions of me because I'm blind, but those that do, it's generally like, well, how does the person who's blind have sex? My answer to that is, well, how do you have sex? The same way, whether we're doing a doggy style or the 69er or whatever the heck we're doing, missionary, whatever position you want, it's all the same.
And, even doctors and things like that, they'll ask you if you're sexually active, but they don't actually expect you to be. There's a lot of ways that the assumption that we don't have sex is just put on us. And we do have sex. We have so much sex.
I think I feel most sexiest when I'm naked. Clothes are a hindrance to me. I'd rather be in a potato sack as far as I'm concerned. The quicker we get to the job, the better it is.
The one question able-bodied people tend to ask me is, are those your kids? Something about myself. I have 5 glorious little humans. You got to help the human population. No. So I have 5 kids, and the common question I get asked once in a while is, are they all yours? Did you actually make them? Which is so weird to ask. And that's when I usually hit the line with, I can't see, but I still know how to make love.
Good sex has to come through communication, understanding, speaking, and really focusing in with one another of what you like and vocalizing. I'm saying that not because I'm blind, but actually vocalizing in whatever fashion. You write it, you leave each other notes, you leave a voicemail, you send a text, whatever you do, that you tell each other what you like. Other than that, sex is not what sex should be. Sex should be pleasurable, enjoyable, fun, fantastic, experimental, adventurous, and at the end, extremely orgasmic.
Coming up, the Triple Cripples.
Life is already hard enough, and my goodness, some orgasms along the way would help. No.
In Focus, we'll be right back. You're watching In Focus.
Hey, I'm Kim. Hi, I'm Jay. And this is Triple Cripples. We're Black, we are women, and we're disabled.
Frustrated with the lack of representation and unaddressed discrimination faced by Black and non-Black people of color living with disabilities, Jumoke Abdullahi and Kim Oliver of London, England, joined forces and created the Triple Cripples. These 2 powerful women are content creators, writers, speakers, and consultants on a variety of topics, including relationships and sex. Jumoke and Kim join me virtually. Welcome, ladies.
Hi. Thank you so much for having us.
Okay, let's get right into it. Jumoke, is access to sexual pleasure and sensuality a social justice issue?
Yes, life is already hard enough, and my goodness, some orgasms along the way would help. No. Hallelujah. Yes, absolutely. There are certain aspects of human life, human existence, that people would either be shocked to find disabled people, or rather aggrieved to find disabled people as well. Like, how dare you be here? How dare you be in these spaces where we talk about sex and sexuality and sensuality and intimacy and all of these things that have to do with the body, with the corporeal form, right? There are so many, damn near every, aspect of life for disabled people, especially those that are women, those that are femmes, those that are racialized, those that are seen as other, that are seen as less than, society and time dependent. It's another thing that you're being denied. It's another part of your humanity that you're being denied. It's another part of being human that people don't think is actually for you. It's a presumption that if somebody's showing me, just even a little bit of attention in a faux romantic sense, that should be enough to last me until the next decade, right? It's that I don't actually have to woo you, that courtship is not a thing that, needs to exist here. It shouldn't be for others, for society to try and deny us that, right? What about when you're trying to self-love, right? If you are still being crowded by these ideas that your body is less than, that you are less than, that you are not somebody, you do not inhabit a body that anybody could find attractive, even being able to look in the mirror at yourself, being able to discover your own body for your own self-pleasure, it's not going to happen. It's not going to connect, it's not going to click. So, and this is you by yourself, right? But these messages are still swirling. It absolutely is a social justice issue. Yeah, because I'm gonna tell you something right now, April. My day goes a lot better if I've been able to take care of myself, you know what I mean? Or have myself taken care of, sometimes not DIY, sometimes just lay back, enjoy.
There are times for both.
Yeah, exactly. There absolutely are times for both. And pleasure is something wonderful, whether you feel pleasure through eating something, seeing something, or pleasure just within your body. That's something that I know we're not going to be denied. It is absolutely just as important. It shouldn't be seen as kind of like, would be nice to have. If it's something that somebody wants, whether they're disabled or not, then it absolutely is a social justice issue.
Kim, our intersecting identities often leave us either desexualized or fetishized by society. Why are these extremes so harmful?
Because many people become unalived because of these extremes. It is because you don't see me as a complete human being, that certain ideas about how you can treat me, how you can interact with me, what I can deal with, are so far off the mark of my humanity that they end up in fatality for me, right? If I don't see you as equal or as a whole human or a whole woman, then it means that the things that I would consider for other women, the ways in which I would treat other women, the ways in which I see other women as maybe deserving of care, as deserving of, patience or kindness or gentleness, I don't necessarily see you or your body in the same way. If I see other women as having intellect and intelligence and perhaps having their own mind, if I just compartmentalize you into your body parts, into your ability to satiate my sexual desires, you don't then get a choice in that. You are literally there for me to use, to have. It also means that I know that in the society, no one cares about you. No one is going to come running when you're hurt. No one's really going to treat your wounds. No one's going to go looking for you when you go missing. No one's really going to care that you go missing, because are you really contributing to society in a way that would make you valid? And so then I too will imbue the ideas of some of the worthlessness, of some of the, well, I'm supposed to be able to take A, B, or C, or maybe that's okay. Maybe I'm not even thinking of it as something that is outside of the norm, because that is all I know. And so I'm not really answering your question, but it is important for us to think about those things.
You answered the question beautifully, Kim. Thank you for that. And following up on what you just said, you've both spoken in the media about how Black disabled women are simultaneously invisible, hypervisible, undesirable, hypersexualized, and infantilized by society. So how have you personally dismantled these messages and claimed your space as the sensual, sexual, desirable goddesses that you are?
That was beautiful, first of all. Thank you. For us, I think it was in the meeting of one another and in the creation of the Triple Cripples. So it is nigh on impossible to have all of the messages that society, throws out there and not go through at some point or another internalized ableism. Whereas the fault lines, the breaks, lie very much outside of us and outside of our community, right? So for us, it's in the creation of the Triple Cripples. It's in the conversations that we have with each other, that we have with ourselves, and that we have with other people as well, because this is so much bigger than us. And we are looking to speak to the experiences of the global majority, which, even though white supremacy would lie to you, the global majority looks like myself, it looks like Kim. It doesn't necessarily look like the people that you see on TV or in the newspapers. And it's a case that this is something that we need to continue the work that had been done prior. We're using different tools, yes, but we are still, going towards that same goal of ensuring that all Black lives matter, in whichever iteration they come in, all disabled existences matter. And we have to ensure that we are listening to and incorporating and centering those that have been most marginalized.
Is there anything you'd like to add to that, Kim?
One of the reasons we created Triple Cripples was for that creation of the community, and being in community with people who understand your experience and walk in your shoes and understand those things that can't really be spoken about. Like, you can't articulate them with language, right? Having people like that you can just know are there is such an empowering experience. And I think for me, and I think I speak for Jumoke as well in saying that having that community, even if it's just between us sometimes, has been one of the most goddess building experiences, right? And has allowed us to really step into our personhood in a way that the world wouldn't permit us to individually. And the world didn't cater for us to feel these ways about ourselves and each other, and people who walk in our shoes. The world doesn't create an environment where you are constantly thinking about those who are the most marginalized. Your goal, your eyes are always supposed to be set on those who are at the top. And that's your goal, that's your desire, that's all you recognize, that's all that's recognized, that's all you see. And so to be facing in is a completely different way of being, and actually is what I think elevates your humanity to a place where you not only become empowered, but you can empower others. Yeah.
Thank you both for sharing. I could speak to you all day, but it looks like we're out of time. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Coming up, words of wisdom.
Human beings are sexual beings, and we shouldn't be made to feel ashamed about that.
In Focus will return. This is In Focus.
Earlier in the show, we heard from Bean, JR, Dev, and Milena about their perspectives on sex, disability, pleasure, and more. Up next, we check in with them again for some final thoughts and perspectives on our theme.
Even just dating somebody with a disability, I mean, the stereotype and the stigma out there is that you need help with everything. I'm going to have to help you with everything. And I've heard that a number of times from men. And the fact of the matter is this just not true, right? Some people need help. Yes, for sure. And I need help too. If there's stairs involved, yeah, I'm going to need some help, right? But that stigma of you need help with everything, that's very incorrect. And I think that stops a lot of people from pursuing relationships or pursuing activities simply because they feel like they're going to have to do everything. And so I feel like if us as people with disabilities can be open and honest and share our fears and our successes and what makes us feel good and what doesn't make us feel good, I feel like we'll be able to get rid of that barrier and at the same time liberate ourselves, because human beings are sexual beings and we shouldn't be made to feel ashamed about that.
Just because you are disabled in one way or another, for me, it's my vision, doesn't mean you're not any good at being intimate. And I would often think that blind people would actually make the best lovers because we all go by feel, right?
In terms of sex and disability, what we're not talking about and what we should be talking about, I think just the general aspect of educating and promoting the fact that people with disabilities do have sex in different ways, in different forms, in different communicative fashions. We don't have to talk about a lot, but I think we have to educate or not cover it up. As people with disabilities, no matter what disability that you have, that you are a person with a heartbeat and blood flowing through you and all sorts of sexual tendencies. Speak it out loud.
First off, there are going to be people who want to have sex with you, and anybody you have to convince to want to have sex with you and convince to find sexy, they're not going to be good sex partners. You're not going to have good sex, and it's not going to be worth it. So it's actually their loss, not yours, if they don't want to have sex with you. And second off, I think more disabled people need to be aware that disabled partners, like having both partners be disabled, can actually create a really intimate and really comfortable environment and setting. And I think a lot of disabled folks think that you have to be with an abled or able-bodied person in order, like your partner has to be able in order to support you, in order to do all the things people are supposed to do during sex or anything like that. But disabled sex can be some of the most intimate, can be some of the most wild, can be some of the most innovative, and it makes it a lot more easier to actually just have all the wild, crazy sex that you want to have, because that person understands and all of that. And the sex can look however you want it to look. There's no prescriptive form to follow. And I think that's really hot.
I feel as human beings, when we grow, we become more comfortable in our bodies. We start to understand what we want, when we want it, who we want it with, or who we don't want it. Maybe it's just with ourselves. So I am 1,000 times more comfortable with my body than what I was when I was younger. And whether it's because I'm blind or older, I can't answer that concretely.
That's the JR secret, really, is just getting to know someone. You know, I've known my wife now. We've been together for 15 years. And then we didn't get married until about 7 years into the relationship. So that's why I'm a big proprietor, a big fan of telling people, take it slow.
I'm a person who is blind, but if you are sexually inclined, it is your right, your choice to have sex, sexual interact with whom you want, when you want, and or whatever you want, aside from the fact of animals and young children. But if it's an inanimate object that you have to plug into a wall, your dildos, your vibrators, whatever you need, it's your prerogative. You do it. You want someone in the bed or on the sofa or camping or you're hiking or you're driving. It's your choice. Don't be ashamed. Talk it out, communicate, and And it's not easy, but the more we do this show, the more you do this, the easier it will be.
I think just the conversation around people with disabilities having sex needs to be more out there, needs to be more readily available, and it needs to be less stigmatized for sure. And having conversations like this is going to do that. So super grateful that you asked me to be a part of this, although it's awkward and I probably really don't want my family to watch this, but it's important to have these conversations. And so by me making myself feel a little bit awkward, hopefully I'm helping other people feel, less awkward in their bodies and on their sexual journeys.
In Focus will be right back. This is In Focus.
As a proud, queer, pansexual, polyamorous, disabled mad woman, sexuality is an important part of who I am as a human being. I have been lucky to have partners and friends who encouraged my questions, supported my exploration, and helped me find my community. In the 2 decades since I became visibly disabled, I've noticed many steps forward in society's openness to discussions of disabled sex. But when it comes to navigating intimate relationships with a disability, there's still so much that isn't talked about, and so many stories that need to be told. I want to thank all our guests on today's show for their openness, for their willingness to share their experiences, and for their perspectives on sex and how it relates to and is enhanced by disability. I hope that their stories and insights have informed and inspired you to start talking to the people in your life about what gives you pleasure, and inspired you to expand your own sexual journey. That's it from In Focus this week. If you'd like to weigh in or you have an issue you'd like us to cover, we'd love to hear from you. Email us at feedback@ami.ca. Thanks for joining us.
Host April Hubbard. Producer Wendy Purvis. Videographer editor Andrew Pickup. Segment producer Jillian Gillis. Narrator Grant Hardy. Media accessibility specialist Em Williams. Audio post Mark Phoenix. Graphics Mike Smith. Opening theme package composed by Matthew Monius for Matt Mac Music. Senior producer Michelle Dudas. President and CEO David Arrington. Copyright 2022 Accessible Media Incorporated.